But I process my audio through Reaper, but it gets delays. The last guest I had on was complaining about it. So next time I have him on, I'm going to use StreamYard because it seems to sync up the audio quite well.
Huh.
No, not StreamYard. I mean Restream.
Oh,
Restream's
Restream,
the one.
yeah. I've heard of that at least.
That's pretty much just like StreamYard.
Yeah, I've heard of people using XSplit or something like that.
Really?
Have you heard of that?
I think that's just a webcam.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, no, it might do. I think people use it for streaming video games.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that, like when they have like speed runs and stuff. But
I should put my phone on silent.
okay, now I pushed the stream thing, but now I just gotta figure out if it's actually working or not. Because I'm using YouTube Studio or whatever it is, or not YouTube, Streamlabs Studio. Have you heard of that?
Oh yeah.
It's OBS, but it's like their
Streamlabs.
Yeah.
It's like, OBS with some stuff added to it. I haven't seen. When I looked into it, I couldn't see any advantage to Streamlabs over OBS.
Okay, I'm just looking at the stream and seeing if I can hear you talking or not. Because I'm using YouTube.
Are we live now?
Or whatever it is. Or not YouTube, Streamlabs. Okay, just gotta wait to see if I can hear you talk. Have you heard of that?
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Yeah, I can hear you. All right, here we are. We're good. We're good to go.
Sweet.
I wanted to have you on. I'm very interested in. I've been seeing more and more on like the YouTube debate scene, kind of the Hare Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita and all that. Can you? But I'm so unfamiliar with it. I'm curious as to what that's all about. How'd you get to that place in your journey?
What is it all about? So I often describe it to people as like a philosophically robust version of Christianity. I think that's useful because it's still centered around devotion to God. It's still monotheism, so you get the basic idea, but we don't have this idea that God's sacrificing himself to himself in order to save you from what he's going to do to you if you don't accept his sacrifice.
So, but you don't do the Old Testament, New Testament thing, right?
No. Yeah, we it's a completely different tradition. So, from what I've heard, there's only two places in the world where major world religions have originated. One is what's it called, the Near East, and the other is the Middle East, and the other is India. So India has a completely self-contained system of philosophy and theology, and then there's the Abrahamic traditions, and then I guess Buddhism is a kind of a third category. But yeah, as for how I got into it, I was Christian growing up, and then when I was 16, I started to get more philosophical. I couldn't make that much sense of Christianity. Having dialogued with some really smart Christians who have more robust theologies than what I was exposed to growing up, I've learned that the church I was going to at the time, the Anglican church, was going through a phase where it was watering everything down in order to try to please the secular public, and so it was basically devoid of most of its content. So that might explain part of my disappointment with Christianity. So then when I always believed in God my whole life. And then when I was 21, I met the Hare Krishnas and, heard some of their philosophy. And straight away I was like, oh, this is it. Because before I thought, well, God exists and God has sent messengers, but I don't really know that any one tradition has an intact version of his message currently alive. And then when I met the Hare Krishnas, I was like, oh no, this is it.
So,
and then
what about the philosophy of it wasn't quite doing it for you?
I can't remember exactly what it would have been, back when I was 16. I don't have any notes or anything, but, now, one of the differences, like, for example, in Krishna consciousness, there's a robust system of like how to actually advance in Krishna consciousness. So it's not like all or nothing, like, just like mentally accept Jesus and you're saved. It's like there's a process for giving up your attachment to the material world and developing attachment for God. and it's almost like a, like psychology, like desires, how to purify your consciousness. There's like a whole thing that goes into it. It's like, if you're studying it from a psychological point of view, there's a lot there. Whereas this Christian idea of like, it's the binary idea of salvation makes very little sense. It's like, okay, so the mass murderer who confesses on their deathbed gets the same thing the moment they leave their body as the other person who dedicated their life to God. And the Muslim who dedicated their life to God gets nothing because they chose the wrong religion.
What tradition did you grow up in?
Anglican.
Oh, really? Anglican. Okay. So
because
that's like the NT rites and stuff, right?
I have no idea. I mean, I didn't really study Christianity at all.
Okay.
I was just
You're just like,
I went to
peace
youth
out.
group and I asked lots of questions, and then
Oh, well, good for you. But yeah, I was a Christian, like, I don't know what they call it, evangelical fundamental Christian pastor for many years.
So you might have some idea what the Anglicans in British Columbia were doing at the time. Well, 2006.
No, I mean,
they're going through a split at the time.
Oh, really? Give me the rundown on that. That's interesting.
Oh, I know nothing about it. My mum's still in Canada, and she knows lots about it. But apparently, like bishops from South Africa were coming over and criticizing them because they were watering down the teaching so much, and they went through a split. So there's another version of Anglicanism that came out of it, which is kind of like, no, we're not going to water things down that much.
Huh. Well, I mean, how united are, like, what's the religion? Is it Hare Krishna? What do you call it? Or are you a Hare Krishna? You are.
I mean, we confuse everybody because I'm a Hare Krishna, and there's the Hare Krishnas, but like you don't say Hare Krishnaism.
Oh. Yeah. What's the ism part?
And you don't say Hare Krishna exists, because those are actually two different names. They're just combined in the mantra. Hare refers to the feminine consort, the feminine energy of the divine. So that the two different people. So say Hare Krishna exists. People do all these things. So for outsiders to refer to us is confusing, because we've got, we say the science of Krishna consciousness. I joined Krishna consciousness. I'm trying to become more Krishna conscious. But then we'll say I became a Hare Krishna. And, in different contexts, we'll use different words depending on the grammar we need. Whereas other religions, they'll just say, I'm a Christian, I joined Christianity. They use the same word, and the word form just changes depending on the usage.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, it is confusing, but how, because Christianity is such a broad term. I mean, there's like, you could ask any one of them something and they'd have a different answer than the next guy. But how consistent is it with Hare Krishna?
Within ISKCON, you'll get fairly consistent answers. I mean, some of the you could say places or aspects of the worldview where Christians are like, if you don't believe this, you're not a Christian. Hare Krishnas that part might be an open question. So the things that you'd have to believe to call yourself, a follower. So where the technical word within the tradition would be Vaishnava, which refers to anyone who worships Vishnu, as opposed to a Shaivite or, a Shakti worshipper or so on. So Vishnu is the category of God. So we have this term, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's got diverse personalities, as one person, but he expresses himself in different forms. So when he's protecting his devotee, he comes as a half man, half lion. When when he's explaining his regal character and following all the rules, he's Lord Ramachandra. And when he's a little bit mischievous and explaining like the more intimate aspects of his personality, he's Krishna. So our focus is on Krishna, because Krishna is the fuller manifestation of the person of God, and the more intimate. I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
Well, I'm just wondering, because it like
the core teachings.
Generally, but like in my spiritual journey, it was I kind of had the same thing. A lot of questions growing up, didn't get a lot of answers, wasn't happy, didn't like the heaven hell thing. But it's so much, like, Christianity is so much wider than that. Like, I feel like you could find anything you want under the label Christian.
Oh yeah, I mean that comes to a point which I find interesting, which is, like if you take we can use the term Bhakti Yogis, which refers to Bhakti Yogi is another term you could use. I do Bhakti Yoga. if we want to like not say Hare Krishna or Vaishnava, we can say Bhakti Yoga, and it's just another term within tradition, which kind of means the same thing. So Bhakti Yoga just means like someone who's devoted to God. So if we took the Bhakti yogis from all the different monotheistic traditions and compared what they believe, they'd be really similar. So that would just be taking the people who are similar to the Hare Krishnas in whatever way. You'd find a striking amount of similarity, and then you'd find the difference between those people and other members of their same religion to be very different. So I find that the whole interfaith debate of like, oh, Christianity versus Islam versus, Hinduism or whatever, I find it's kind of meaningless, because it's like, well, let's just look at the actual different beliefs and focuses and practices, and like have specific names that refer to this kind of belief and this kind of practice, and compare those.
What was it like specifically that you're like, Christianity doesn't have this, but Bhakti Yoga has this?
Well,
like I know you said philosophy, but like specifically, like, about what?
So the first talk I went to was talking about how, we think we're going to become happy in this material world. And the focus of that talk was by finding out the right soulmate or marrying the right person. Then he was explaining how, we're tiny sparks of the divine, and you get two tiny sparks of the divine and rub them together, they're not going to satisfy each other. Whereas God, who's, the source of all sparks, and, the actual source of everything good, and that God can fully satisfy us. And I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. So again, there might be Christians that talk about that, but the detail of philosophy, for example, the process of purifying your consciousness, which is described in the scripture, is, it makes far more sense. God cleans the heart of the devotee who's developed the urge to hear his messages, which are glorious when properly chanted. And then like there's this whole list of there's like 5 verses in a row that give the description of how you become. So you develop the urge to hear the messages of God by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice. So you find someone who's got God consciousness, and you serve them. That's pleasing to God, and that develops in you a desire to hear about God and to become God conscious yourself. And then I can't remember the rest of the details, but it's like it's less about just like someone else's, like sometimes devotees do a play called Tab It to Jesus, where they make fun of this Christian idea that Jesus paid for your sins. It's like tab it to Jesus. It's like you're at a bar and you order another drink and you're like, oh, just charge it to Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Does your faith have like a heaven or hell or anything like that, or is it just oneness, like achieving something?
So there is some descriptions of hell given in the Bhagavatam, but like one of the commentators who's taken as like we use the word acharya, he describes it that it's hyperbolic, that it's more there to, like, you could call it cognitive behavioral therapy. You tell some really striking stuff that's emotionally jarring in order to purify someone's consciousness, or bring about an emotional transformation, but it's not like a literal description of what's going to happen. It's described within the Bhagavatam that visits there are very brief, so nobody's getting punished for eternity. If somebody's like a serial killer, they'll go to some kind of hell, suffer some kind of horrible torture for a brief amount of time, then they'll take birth again, either as an animal or as a human.
So it's like reincarnation.
But then, so there is a spiritual world. So if like the Hindu word is liberation or mukti, but there's different kinds of liberation. So what the kind of liberation we're interested in is entering the spiritual world. The generic term for the spiritual world is Vaikuntha, which literally means the place which is free from all anxiety. And then within there's a variety of places depending on your relationship with God. You can go to different planets, so to speak, and some of them are filled with awe and reverence. So God's kind of like the king, and everybody has quite a distant relationship with God. And then the highest is Goloka Vrindavan, where God is like a 16-year-old cowherd boy who like wrestles with his friends and goes out and cares for the cows, or maybe he's younger than 16 and Goloka Vrindavan, and is very intimate.
You said wrestles with cows?
cowherd boys. So that Krishna is a cowherder, and the young boys in Vrindavan, they take the cows out during the day and feed them, in different pastures. They don't have like a whole system of fencing the way we do for modern farming. They just like actually go out, herd the cows, and bring them back in again.
But this is like the highest level of paradise, and
yeah. Oh. And so,
well, where do you play into that? If you make it there, do you herd cows too?
You could be any number of things. So you don't become one of the people that's already there. You become one of their servants. So you could even be a blade of grass. So everything in the spiritual world is conscious. God doesn't interact with anything that's not like conscious and willing. So there's not like like I sit on this chair is not conscious, but when God sits on something, it's conscious, and he's having he's accepting loving service from the chair.
Now what, just quickly, like, what, you wake up in the morning, how do you practice this? You say the chants, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've got kids and like work full time and stuff. So I don't really follow the ideal, but the ideal thing, which I did before I had kids, was you get up like 4 a.m. or something, and if you're near a temple, you go to the temple. There's a Mangalarti program, starts at 4:30, runs till 5:15, and you sing a few bhajans, and the deities are worshipped. And then after that, you chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Rama. That's one mantra. You chant 108 of those, 16 times.
Was this this was the one that George Harrison famously was into, yeah?
Yeah. George Harrison made a lot of people devotees.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first time I ever heard of it. They sing that song that they stole from the Ronettes or whatever. That's cool. I mean, one of the things that I didn't like about my version of Christianity in which I grew up was the dualism. Like, there's earth, and then there's heaven, and then there's hell, and Satan's fighting God and all this stuff. And the place I came to now was the only label I have for myself is like it's tentative Christian naturalist. So my view of Jesus is he's kind of like an anarchist, kind of Black Panthers revolutionary kind of character. You ever heard of anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Jesus was definitely a revolutionary.
Yeah, and but like in the sense of like, he's not saying these things to like make you have this relationship with God or to get you to heaven or stuff like that. It's anti-empire, it's anti, the hierarchies, anti-Rome and all this stuff. What do you think about that? Have you heard of that kind of thing?
You mean like a kind of like secular or more atheistic interpretation where there's not actually like a spiritual destination to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, it's more it's nuanced in that, like, it's not like when Jesus talks about stuff like hell, right? You've heard of this thing with Gehenna is actually this garbage dump burning outside kind of thing, outside of the city walls, right? Have you heard of that?
No.
Yeah, so Gehenna, this thing that we interpret as hell, in other traditions, they see it's literally a place in Jerusalem you can go to. They'll take you on a tour of it, but it's just a garbage dump outside where they throw bodies and garbage and dead animals and things like this. And the interpretation that people like me would take is this is what humanity and civilization does when it succumbs to the evil ruling nature of empire and of civilization, is it creates fires and creates a dump in a place where there's no life and where there's, so it has more like, it's more political and more things like that, right, so rather than a spiritual thing.
Hell is a place on earth that we create when we don't live properly, and heaven is a place on earth we create when we do live properly, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think there's some room for like maybe Paul or maybe people in the Old Testament thought there was like a spiritual place to go. But as far as I can tell, Jesus, he never really talked like that. His main thing was giving the poor and giving the oppressed peoples stories to tell to survive in their world.
I mean, I haven't studied the Bible. I don't get into trying to interpret Christianity, so I can't really comment on that so much.
Yeah.
But, interpreting it through the lens of Krishna consciousness, then, we can see Jesus said a lot of things that are really in line with, what's taught in our tradition. So we tend to look at it through that light, and we wouldn't arrive at that conclusion at all. I mean, there isn't this idea that the material world is profane and the spiritual world is divine. This split that you get in Christian teachings. It's more that the material energy is God's energy, but because of our having turned away from God, we're covered by a kind of illusion which makes us falsely perceive it as separate from God. And when we develop our love of God and transform our consciousness back to a more natural state, because the nature of the soul is to serve God, turning away from God and, trying to be the center of our own world and trying to, gratify our senses and so on, that's unnatural. So when we become God conscious, then we start to see God everywhere in material energy also. So, for example, someone who's God conscious, even if they're being persecuted and, in some kind of prison, they'll still be connected with God. So you can be liberated in the self-same body through your state of consciousness.
So, that resonates with me. In terms of that was the other thing I didn't like about the tradition I grew up in. It was really a lot about myself and my personal relationship with God. And a kind of a pithy way to put it was about your private piety. Does that
Right.
sound true for your form of faith? Is it about yourself, and is it about your oneness and your personal connection with God and your eternal destiny and things like this?
Well, I mean, that is a big focus. The description is, you can't save other people without saving yourself. So, when you're on an airplane and the mask drop down, they all say you got to put your own mask on first. So there's definitely an element of, you save yourself. But an essential way that you become God conscious yourself is by helping other people become God conscious. It's not like you can't just go away to the Himalayas and, chant your rounds really nicely and expect to actually be focusing on your rounds and not distracted and become God conscious. So, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that one who shares this message with others is most dear to me. So, I mean, that's kind of
that sounds a lot like you just said, like the evangelical thing. It's you take from God, but then you got to share it into the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's more satisfying.
Well, no, I mean, it sounds exactly the same to me. And what about politics?
I mean, among devotees, you get a diverse range of political views. It's not like doctrinally decided that you need to have certain political views. There's a Vedic system of running society, but and there's we're in Kali Yuga, which is the dark age, and you can't expect any of that to work. So it's more just be practical and figure out what works. I mean, you do get ultra conservative devotees that are this is Vedic society and this is what we should be doing. But what I have to say to that kind of thing is there's this thing called half hen logic, where it's oh, here's the hen that lays the golden eggs, but I have to feed it all the time. Let me cut in half. And I'll just take the side that gives the golden eggs and I'll throw out the side that eats.
Oh, yeah.
So when you have half hen logic, you kill the hen and you don't get any golden eggs.
So, but what is the hyper conservative form of whatever? Keep forgetting what to call your religion.
A hyper conservative. I mean, I don't even know if it's I mean, you can just call it Krishna consciousness or Hare Krishna or Vaishnavism. Anyone's fine.
You've given me way too many options now. Now I've forgotten all of them.
Just call it Hare Krishna.
I'll
That way
call
you're
it
chanting
Krishna
Hare Krishna.
consciousness. That sounds that's easy.
Sounds good. So the hyper-conservative version would be like, marrying girls when they're 12 and
Well, I know,
like,
but what
all
do they
sorts of
say
crazy
about
things.
like how we should be living in the world? They say we should,
The government.
we should only vote for Trump, and we should kill all the
There's
whoever's.
there's no politician that would represent the Hare Krishna views. We should close all the slaughterhouses. We should get rid of all the sexual stuff off TV.
Okay.
But the ultra conservative stuff, I think it's a version of Krishna consciousness which is polluted by Muslim influences, because Muslims ruled India for 700 years, and so that's had so much impact on Hindu culture. So when people take an ultra conservative version of Krishna consciousness, they're often taking a version of it which is polluted by ideas of women, which came from Islam culture.
Is that
it'll be this idea.
the Hari part?
Isn't
that what you said?
No. Hare is like Radharani, like the divine feminine. That's different.
That's a different thing.
It's like this ultra conservative idea. The husband's the guru of the family, and the woman should be in the kitchen.
You're talking about like patriarchal influences from Islam.
That's the ultra conservative thing. So what I have to say to that is like, I mean, maybe in a Vedic culture where there's a whole system, like the social scientist Jonathan Haidt went and stayed in India and lived in these cultures, and it's like the women didn't talk to him; they stayed in the kitchen, like super conservative, like that women were married young, but these people were happy.
Mm-hmm.
Like these women were happy, the men were happy, the culture was working. So it's like if we try that kind of thing in the West, the women will not be happy, guaranteed.
Oh,
right?
That's a provocative thing.
Well, I mean, if you take it too far, they won't be happy. Like,
but in your form of Krishna consciousness, you're fine with keep the slaughterhouses open. Let's all watch porn together.
No,
of course not. So how do you turn it? You want to turn it down a little bit. You're saying there's these ages or something. We're in this age, and the next age is coming, and this age we're fine with this stuff.
Satya Yuga is. We've got another 425,000 years left of Kali Yuga. It's only going to go downhill.
What defines
by the end of Kali Yuga, people will be like 4 foot tall, and they'll be like eating. Like it's described, people will be eating babies to survive. The taxation from the government will get so bad that people will end up living in the forest.
So wait, but how long is that going to last?
Kali Yuga is 432,000 years. Satya Yuga is 4 times as long as that.
432,000. When did that start?
5,000 years ago.
Like when God created the world or something?
No, the world's hundreds of thousands of years old or millions of years old or whatever. I'm not expert on Vedic cosmology. I don't know the exact timeline.
Okay.
But yeah, things are ancient. The age of the Earth actually matches in the Vedic cosmology actually matches up perfectly with the estimated age according to science.
And that's the thing that I've been seeing come floating around modern day debates and all this stuff is that you've got some of these people from your tradition and some apologists coming on and saying, well, our tradition predicted it within whatever amount. And
yeah, I was the first guy to bring that on.
That was
to
you?
bring him onto YouTube.
That's
I brought
cool,
him onto YouTube, had him on my channel, and then he went on Modern Day Debate a few times.
Yeah, that's pretty cool stuff. I mean, even like T-Jump brings that up every once in a while as like that's like like the best proof that like a theist has ever come up with, right? Because it was
when he's debating a Muslim on scientific accuracies, then he'll always he'll like send our guy a message and be can you just give me the details again? He's like read his book, and that cracks us up seeing him use it in the debate.
Yeah, but was it just for clarity? He had to like translate some of literature, right, to like do some math on it or whatever? Do you know this?
Yeah, so his argument why no one else discovered this before him is that basically the influence of people like what's his name? Anyway, when the British came to India, they worked really Max Muller. They worked really hard in order to when they got to India, they figured that it was going to be really hard for them to conquer India because the culture was so deep. Mm-hmm. So what they had to do was destroy people's faith in the culture. So they denigrated it every way they possibly can. So all the Indologists were there to show how Western culture is better and Indian culture sucks. And so like Max Muller and all these people, like the first Westerners to go and translate stuff from Sanskrit, they had a vendetta to put down Hinduism.
Is that the British Raj?
Well, Max Muller was a German scholar.
Oh, okay. Because
he can't.
My favorite movie is Mystery Men, and there's a character that he dresses up like with a turban, and his superhero character is he throws forks and he wears green, and he's called the Blue Raja, and it's from and he says it's the Blue Raja because his character speaks in kind of like a British accent, because it comes from when Britain took over India and they were sovereign over it, and the Hindu word for sovereignty is Raj, so they called it the British Raj. Have you heard of this? Is that what you're talking about?
Seen that before.
This is based on like a real event.
This was during the time of British rule, but I'm talking about the Indologists, the scholars, not the British government.
Oh, okay. So you're saying they were looking at it, they
got intellectuals. They got intellectuals to come and do the dirty work. The rulers are just like, let's get this guy to come over and credit. So it was a subversion technique. If you can if you can say, like that's what Aryan invasion theory comes from. It's like Aryan means white. We're actually the white people. We came to India thousands of years ago, or whenever they date it, and we brought Vedic culture. That came from us. Now we're here again to bring an even better culture, to bring British culture. And this was the indoctrination.
I mean, that's colonization, right? That's just religious colonization.
So, but as they did it with subversion tactics rather than just like strong-arming everyone with military force. There was actually very little military in India.
Yeah. Well, that's where the phrase divide and conquer comes from, right? You divide the people.
Yeah.
Make them fight.
They did it.
And then you've won.
Like all this, these Muslims and Hindus in India killing each other, that wasn't there until the British. The British actually started that. Yeah, they're really good at it. So anyway, the point I was coming to is Siddharth. He's saying that nobody discovered this because people weren't looking at India to be like, let's figure out this rich tradition. Let's see how deep it is. So, people were looking at it to put it down.
Do you know how he got that number though?
So he looked through a translation from a commentator. I think it was a really big commentator on the tradition from a few hundred years ago, Sridhar Swami. And Sridhar Swami had mentioned it's a factor of two things. So I think the reason why you have to use a factor of two is because, there's time dilation. So depending where you are in the cosmos, you'll experience time differently. So that the celestial planets, where the demigods live, they experience time slower than we do. And in the hellish planets that are below here, they experience time faster. So the factor of two is because the book was actually written to describe things to people living on another planet. So you have to add a factor of two to make it match our time.
I'm curious. Have you ever had a debate, like a theism debate? Yourself?
I've debated atheists, but I haven't debated people from other religions yet. I've been trying to find a Muslim to have on for debate, but I'm struggling to find one.
And your channel is Theology Unleashed?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you've just had...
Yeah, I've had other people on debate. Like I've had Seth Hart, who's a Christian debate, Adi Purusha, who's a Hare Krishna academic. And often I try to find someone else who'll do a better job of it than me. And it also enables me to scale my channel because I've worked full time and have a family. So like I'll have somebody else hosting and somebody else debating, and like I'll be with my family and I'll just like set up the stream for them and do a little bit of admin for it.
What's your family? What's the size?
Two kids, two boys. One's 5 and the other's 2.
That's cool. I have my oldest, my daughter 10, and then I have 2 boys, 7 and 4.
Oh, right.
That's cool. And you're the electrician, right?
Yeah.
So, and you live in New Zealand?
Yeah.
I'm just remembering. So, what's that like over there? This is what I really wanted to talk about.
So our wiring rules, I personally think, make a lot more sense over here. Like, you don't have to run things in metal conduit, and nothing has to get like the only things that need to get signed off by an inspector are like actual like dangerous things like mains cables and stuff. Most of the things you can just sign off yourself.
You sign them off yourself.
Yeah, you can sign off your own work unless it's like installing.
Does that make you liable?
Meter. Oh, you're definitely liable. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Push,
okay,
push
yeah,
your
of course. So do you run NMB everywhere?
What's that?
Non-metallic wires, sheathed, and
Oh,
what do
I
you run
mean,
it in?
TPS.
See, I don't know what that is.
It stands for tough protective sheath, but it's like kind of flat cable. It's got 3 conductors and then like a tough outer sheath. So
Ungrounded
double insulated.
conductor, a grounded conductor, and a ground.
Yeah.
So how does your system work over there?
So we have a multiple Earth neutral system. So unlike
Wait,
you,
hold
we don't
on.
we
Multiple grounded conductors?
so multiple Earth means at every site you've got a ground stake. So if there's a new house, you drive in an Earth stake.
Oh yeah, we
you
do
run
that.
a 6 mil Earth back to the board. That board gets connected to the neutral.
Yep. Okay, we do that.
No, because you ground your transformers in the middle. You have 55
Oh
volts
yeah,
on
that's
either
right.
side.
You do so. Yeah, but so you have 2 hots to each house and no middle one.
So, well, the neutral is grounded.
Yeah, on our systems, ours is grounded.
No, your neutral's got 55 volts.
Our neutral, the potential between a neutral and our hot is 120 volts.
Yeah, but the potential between the neutral and Earth is 55 volts or 60 volts if it's 120.
Well, it should be 0 if it's in the panel.
I thought, maybe I'm mistaken. I thought you guys center tapped your transformer.
Yeah.
So that the Earth went on the center, and then you had 110 volts on the neutral and between neutral and phase, you get 110 volts. Between Earth and either one, you get 55 volts.
55? I haven't heard that.
Okay.
But
maybe
you're
I'm
probably
wrong.
right. You sound like you know your stuff more than I do. How long have you been doing it?
7 years or something.
Okay, so I've been doing about 4. So you're way ahead of me.
Yeah, but the stuff I'm saying about North American power, I learned like when I was doing my pre-trade course, and
so
that's either right or it's wrong.
Are you guys on 240 over there, or how do you guys measure your?
Yeah, we got 240 volts.
240, but like in a residential house, you've got just 240 everywhere. There's no 120.
Everything's 240. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's so much better. Over there, what you want to you got to run 4 mil cable. Oh, you don't even talk in fills, but you got to run fat cable for everything, because it's low voltage.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We call it line voltage, right? 120, 240 line voltage.
But then some things that are higher voltage,
The highest thing that we'll have in a house is 240.
Right. Yeah. So you must to get 240. How many cables come into the dwelling?
We got just the same thing. One hot, another hot, and then a neutral. So it's 240 and then split in the middle 120.
Oh, right. Yeah. So we just have two wires coming in.
Yeah. See, how optimal is that?
And then sometimes you get 3-phase power.
Yeah. Sometimes we have 3-phase too. Right.
So when you have 3-phase, do you only have 3 conductors coming in, or do you still have a?
You have 3.
Right.
Yeah. And
do you have a transformer on site so you can get your 110 volts or whatever?
I don't. There's only.
Oh no! I know what it'll be. What voltage is your 3-phase?
It's like 208 between one of the hots and the high leg.
Yeah, right. So when you've got 3-phase power, it's because our 3-phase power is 400 volts.
Really? I think ours is. I don't know. I haven't done any of that work in reality. I've done some calculations and things, but how often do you guys have 3-phase over there?
You will. If you're really rural, they'll require you to have 2 or sometimes 3 phases in your house, because there'll be one transformer, right, for 3 houses, and in order to balance the loads, you got to have 2 phases on your house. But generally, a house will only have single phase. You can request to have 3-phase if it's I want to run this motor, and I need 3-phase power. Then you can get it. Or whatever it is. I know sometimes a dwelling will have 3-phase, and sometimes people will get it removed because your power bill's higher if you got 3-phase. But yeah, commercial buildings are all 3-phase. So you got yeah.
Have you ever thought about the similarities between the code and Holy Scriptures?
No.
You've never thought about that? I think about that all the time. Because between you know, like in the Bible and things, you have your Old Testament, which would be like an old version of our code, which is called the NEC. And then, but there's updates, right? And things change. There's new technologies, so they got to update it, and that'd be like the New Testament or something. I mean, does that ring any bells for you?
The Vedas don't get updated. You get commentaries on them. So, I mean, to carry the analogy over, it would be like if you had a bunch of like stipulations, like, make sure the wiring's safe, make sure it can supply the needs of the customers. If you had a bunch of stuff like that was true all the time, for thousands of years, no matter what possible situation, these things would be true. And they were just like generic principles. So we get from our scriptures like generic principles like that. And then to know how to apply it, you need someone who is themselves God conscious. It's a bit like if you had like, like we often we use a medical example, if you have, anyway, like you got someone who knows the science of electricity and who knows the needs of the customer and they know what makes safety, that they'll give a commentary on the stipulations and they'll say, and this is how we're going to, make these principles become realized in our current day and age where we're contending with these challenges.
So you're saying you guys have people who are really well educated and read, and then they kind of interpret. It's not
just about education too. It's about having an experience of God, like actually becoming God conscious. So
see, that's like a Catholic thing almost. Like you have to prove that you've done a miracle, and you have to do this to become a saint. Is it like that?
I mean, it's not about proving you've done a miracle or something. I mean, sure, it can be difficult to distinguish externally whether someone's God conscious, but you can tell if somebody's more God conscious than you are. And then when somebody who's more God conscious than you are rates somebody, it's like, stages up the chain. So, you look at somebody who's higher than you and they, at each stage you can distinguish among people higher than you.
Do you consider yourself
you can't distinguish.
GC?
No.
Do people say that?
I'm...
GC? No. That guy's hella GC. People don't say that?
No, that's nice. Maybe we'll start using that.
You're pretty serious.
Hare Krishnas have been quite insular since the 70s. So, a lot of people joined, like the movement started in the 70s predominantly, and it's been quite insular. So most of our sayings are things that people stopped using 40, 50 years ago.
So, but you don't consider yourself GC?
No,
You're pre-GC.
Yeah. I'm just a worm and stool.
How do you get there? I mean, because like it sounds like you almost sound like me, because I want to be a follower of Christ, but I almost can't because I feel like Jesus calls me to sell everything and follow him, but I really can't do that because I got a family and kids and a job. And what do you want me to do? Just throw it all away? I mean, so there's a part of me where I'm like, I like Jesus a lot, but I can't really follow you.
So Sri Chaitanya, he taught, I can't remember the Bengali, I should probably learn it, but he taught that whatever position you have in society, just stay there and serve God from that position. So it's not like you need to like give up your job and renounce your family or anything like that and go to the forest and, so you can dedicate your life to God. You can offer anything to God. So raising your children well can be something you do as an offering to God.
So you can become GC just by doing your thing, but what's holding you back?
So, and that's what's holding me back? You're like my mentor in Krishna consciousness who's trying to coach me how to be a better devotee.
It's also, it's like an electrician thing. Like, we got a trainee that he's got his hours. He's been working for years and years and years, and he just can't bring himself to like, okay, I'm gonna study every day and do it, and then you become a licensed electrician, right?
So an analogy that's used, I don't, maybe it's allegorical, but the guru goes to the disciple and says, when are you gonna give me the mercy? When are you gonna? I can't remember the details of the story, and he keeps going, and finally one day the guru grabs onto this tree, and starts claiming he's stuck to this tree and he can't get off. Help me. And the disciple's like, well, Gurudev, you need to let go of the tree. And he's like, no. When are you going to give me the mercy? Release me from this tree. It's like, Gurudev, just let go of the tree. The point is, we have these attachments in the material world and we hold on to them. So, you can become God conscious in a moment, but you have to be prepared to give up your attachments. So we're attached to, trying to be the center of our own world and taking shelter of our intelligence. So, when we're, scared, then, do we go take shelter of some material arrangement? Do we think, I'm going to fix this problem with my own intelligence and my own ingenuity? Or do we think, no matter what intelligence or, resources I throw at this, another problem could crop up. I'm in a hopeless condition, and take shelter of God. And we still use our intelligence and ingenuity and, do what we can to fix our problems. But it's the point of the state of consciousness of where we're taking our shelter. So a devotee is really tested. You really see a devotee's true colors when they're in a trying situation. There's one story I heard. There was an American spy who was in either Russia or Germany, or whatever world war it was, or I think it might have been Russia, and they were spying, and they had, the perfect Russian accent. They were actually like quite high up in the government in Russia. They managed to like get well placed, and then nobody suspected anything. And then one day they like stubbed their toe or something, and they yelled out with an American accent. So, like that, when we can put on a show of being a nice devotee, but the real test of how conscious of God we are, how much we've taken shelter is, when we're actually scared and we cry out, do we take shelter of the material energy, or do we take shelter of the spiritual energy? Do we think I'm going to fix this, or, this doctor is going to fix this, or do we think, only God can fix this?
And that sounds a lot like my tradition, the evangelical tradition. But I want to go back to the rules thing. So from your perspective, you have the Vedas. What does God want us to do? How does he want us to live? Well, it's hard to interpret the Vedas, right? So you have a scholar or somebody that's become God conscious that can kind of explain to you how to do it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, like if you have a medical textbook and you just read it yourself, you're not going to know how to perform heart surgery. Mm-hmm. And, you have a bunch of people who've never done heart surgery and never learned how to do heart surgery, flipping through the book, and then they go and operate somebody, the patient's not going to survive. But if you have somebody who's actually done it, and they're like, this is how you do it, and they're like, this is the book, and they teach you and they show you, then you can learn how to do heart surgery.
And I think that's better than the thing that I kind of grew up with, which is, it's almost like you just interpret it yourself, and if you don't come to the same conclusion as us, then there could be problems or something. But there's almost kind of a negative implication to going to a scholar or something, because the Bible should just be obvious for everybody. Like it's just a plain reading. It says it was created in 6 days, so gosh darn it, it's created in 6 days, right? So where's the difference there?
I'm actually hosting a discussion on Tuesday, my time, but it'll probably be Wednesday, your time, between two scholars on a Christian one and a Hare Krishna one on comparative hermeneutics.
You said Christian and then a Hare Krishna?
Yeah, we're going to have Keith Ward and Krishna Shaichasami.
Oh, that's cool. I'll be tuning in for
that. So, I mean, I think you will find other Christian versions of Christianity which do have far better hermeneutics than what you just described.
No, and I'm just saying that's the one that I grew up in, but I've moved on. I think this method of trying to get a scholar, somebody who knows what they're talking about, somebody who's been in my mind, I want to just listen to the experts in almost any field. Maybe that's foolish, but I just don't see another way to do it. I don't see a better way, because like you're saying, I don't know how to fix a car. I don't know how electricity works unless an expert tells me, right? So it's kind of led me into more the what do you call the smart guy side of theology, the people that have doctorates and things like this. And then all of a sudden, I just find myself, okay, well, I guess I'm a naturalist now, because I can't believe in spiritual things and the supernatural, and it's unfortunate, but that's kind of just my feelings. What do you think about that?
To say something about the other side, I do. It is said that supposing like the whole Hare Krishna movement fell apart and everybody lost the plot, there was nobody alive that understood the science of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada said somebody could find his books, study them, and start things up again.
Right.
But I think that's a special case where, it's like perennialism. Like like this argument that's given by atheists, like, something we can call something knowledge if you wiped all the knowledge out on the planet again, we would build up science again. We would build the airplane. Eventually, people would figure it out and we would have induction motors. They say that wouldn't be the case with religion. People wouldn't invent Christianity all over again. I don't think that's true, because I think if that happened, God would send prophets. God would appear in people's hearts. The knowledge would be delivered again. So in a situation where there is no other source of the knowledge, then God can appear in your heart and give you the instruction. But he doesn't do that for people who can actually go down the street and ask a Hare Krishna or, name your religion of choice, which you have faith in. But yeah, definitely the Hare Krishna tradition has a robust system of hermeneutics and text analysis. And there's like all sorts of scholars, all through the tradition studying other religions. It's like the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, who Sri Chaitanya taught with his first followers. They were some of the greatest scholars in India at the time. They knew all the philosophies of India inside out, especially Jiva Goswami. Like, he'd studied in depth all of well, he did it in 1 year. He was so smart. He just went to, can't remember the name of the village, of the town, which was like the seat of learning at the time. And shortly after that, Navadvip became the seat of learning, because Jiva Goswami came there and a few other people came there and brought all the knowledge there. So Sri Chaitanya appeared in India, in the town which was the seat of learning for all of India at the time. And the six Goswamis wrote voluminous books, like we can't even think how many books they've read. And that we've got people translating these original books and analyzing them. What we have a shortage of in our tradition is what I'm trying to do, which is philosophy of religion. Like, we've got plenty of people doing the work of, let's analyze Krishna consciousness through the lens of Vedic intellectual culture. But what we don't have much of, let's analyze Krishna consciousness, or at least learn how to articulate it in the vocabulary and system of knowledge of Western philosophy and Western philosophy of religion. So that's what I'm trying to do.
And you're doing a darn good job of it, I must say. Just before we close here, I think what I love about the kind of the literature and the tradition I've stumbled upon with the radical, revolutionary, anarchist Jesus stuff is it seems to be like really gritty and has stuff to say about like the deepest parts and of the roots of the problems that we're seeing in the world. Like, to me, like, because there's fake problems that my other tradition seemed to like, okay, well, these guys are over here and they're touching themselves and they're watching bad things on the computer, and that's the thing that God doesn't like, right? And that seems to me to be like a distraction, because there's actually like real tangible evil in the world, like where we're just raping and pillaging the earth, and we're all kind of mind washed to just want to buy stuff, and social media, and it's just changing our minds, and there's the poverty, and there's racism, and there's sexism, and there are all these things. And my tradition almost has nothing to say about those things, because it's about that thing that I said earlier. It's about your private piety. You're standing with God. Are you going to heaven? Are you going to hell? But there's this other tradition where Jesus, he wants to get at the very core of what it means to be human, and what it means to exist on a planet under the foot of empire. And there's this tradition that I've stumbled into that's saying that they're working with indigenous cultures. They're working with oppressed communities on the outskirts of town that are being marginalized. And this is where I think that the story of Jesus and the Gospels come in spades and have stuff to say to those cultures and to those problems. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a nice point. I would tend to agree with that. So Srila Prabhupada, who's the founder of the Hare Krishna movement in the West, he's like the preeminent guru for us in ISKCON. He was in India. They were opening a temple there. It was this village. It was the holy place where Sri Chaitanya came, and he was building a temple there. It was just like real like backwater village of India, and he saw children fighting with dogs over food from the rubbish pile. And he said, we need to start a food distribution program. Nobody should go hungry within 10 miles of a Hare Krishna temple. And they started it. So,
and that's like, that would be like the Indian version of Gehenna, right? It's a garbage pile.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
And it's burning. And well, that's what I'm saying is put that.
That's the one you mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Put that image in your mind when you're reading the Gospels and you see the word Gehenna. Think about that. Don't think about Jesus is saying, well, you better watch out because God's going to burn you in hell or whatever. He's saying this evil world that we live in creates that and lets that go on. And the religious system, like the Jewish rabbis and the scribes of his day, were seeing that and turning a blind eye to it. And that's why Jesus came, is to rebuke that, because they're letting those children suffer in such a, and saying, just like, well, I'm going to read my Bible and make sure I say all my things and stuff. But you're saying there are traditions in the Krishna consciousness that are doing the good justice work.
Yeah, I mean, of course you get like, an institution and sooner or later that they can neglect some of these things, but Krishna consciousness is still young and I don't think it's neglected that much. We've got food for life programs. It would be nice to see more of it. I mean, somebody, I would push back on that sort of naturalistic interpretation of what Jesus is saying, that I think it's useful to understand that, like if you live a sinful life and you just like, live in opulence while children are starving in the street and, and your opulence is fueled by the poverty and so on, that you're not going to have a good destination in your next life. And this is something you should take seriously. I think there's some use to that interpretation as well as what we're creating here now. So
you're absolutely right, and I think that Jesus uses it in just that way. But and the difference is he's punching up, right? He's punching and he's saying the people with the power, the people that are cozy and comfy on their couches, that have influence and money, those are the people that have bad stuff coming from God. But it's the poor people, it's the people in the pews that are just coming to get something from God. It's something, they're trying to get shelter, they're trying to get food, they're trying to get community, they're trying to get this. Jesus is inviting them to come, but there's a lot of traditions that just want to say, well, we're all sinners, we're all going to hell, where God hates all people. It's not that, it's not in your face like that, but it's bigger than that. We're all under this system of oppression, and we're all kind of being told stories by the people in power, right? The government, but it sounds like conspiracy theories, but we're told there's two parties, right? And one of them's right and one of them's wrong. Well, maybe there's a bigger picture to this. Maybe they're all wrong. Maybe we're all caught up in this system of, there's the rich people, there's the poor people, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and these two parties will never make that go away because it's embedded in the system of civilization, of capitalism, of these kind of things. And I think the Gospels have a lot to say about that kind of thing. And but to get back to the justice thing, I think that religions and the Krishna consciousness thing should watch out for that. Like if you guys are on the path like the early Christians were of doing justice, maintaining community, feeding the poor, being a father to the fatherless, and taking care of the orphans, the widows. But once money comes in and once power and influence comes in, all of a sudden they're like, well, we need a building now. Oh, and now we need money so that we can do more good work. That's when you start to have problems. And that's where...
Yeah, human elements.
Well, yes, human elements, but this is what I think the Gospels talk about when they talk about like demon possession. It's the spirit of evil that says you need to have this power and you need to have this influence in the world, and it's only going to come about through money and through advertising and things like this. Well, you don't need it. The Jesus community didn't need it. They were just going around feeding and relying on God and the Spirit to provide their every need. And they were about doing just that, saving people from poverty and giving them stories and sticking it to the man like good anarchists. And this is where I think I think I found that the Jesus Christian thing shines its brightest is this kind of thing, as opposed to watch out for hell because God's coming for you.
Yeah, I think there's a bit there. Bhakti Siddhanta in our tradition, one of our great acharyas, he said that institution or organization is a necessary evil. So you need to have buildings and you need to have like an organizational structure, but there's so many evils that come with that we need to guard against. So he wrote a bit on this, and you can see that to be the case. You know, like you have like a nice spiritual movement, you know, the teachings, everything's going away nicely, and as soon as you've got nice buildings and it's like, I want to be the temple president, no, I want to be the temple president, or we're going to do this thing with the building, no, we're going to, then the infighting starts and the essence gets lost. But so I think it's more just something we need to guard against. I don't think it's like, well, we shouldn't have nice buildings and we shouldn't have an organizational structure. We just need to understand that when we do have nice buildings and we do have organizational structure, we're playing with fire. We need to make sure
we all are.
We're very careful.
And all religions can fall into this, right? It's just you get distracted. Yeah. You get distracted from the main thing, and it's like the story of the Good Samaritan all over again. You got this suffering man on the street, and you think, well, you know, I got better things to do. You know, I got buildings to build and you know, sermons to write. Is that really what this is about, right? Don't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness is pretty good in that, like, the governing, you know, the governing body commission, whatever, the GBC, they don't have that much oversight over little projects and temples. So, you know, they have some say, but really ISKCON is a collection of loosely affiliated temples, and if you don't like one community, you can go to another one, and there's quite a wide variety, and most of the nectar happens at the grassroots. So it'll either be that there'll be a temple president that's actually like running things themselves really well, or there'll be somebody who's just like, I'm not happy with the local project, I'm going to do my own thing, and they start some amazing project. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of grassroots still.
That's great. Well, I'll be keeping an eye out for it, and I'm glad that you've got the channel up and running. We got good conversations happening. I'll let you go though. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate making the time, waking up early. It's really been a blessing.
Evan will probably tune out at the point where we start talking about electricity.
Hey, I think it's interesting. Everyone uses it. How does it work? Nobody knows. It's like magic to them. But it's people like you and me.
I keep thinking if you knock your mic, it's going to be swinging back and forth for the whole rest of the interview.
Oh, like just...
Yeah.
I've actually got one of those like articulating arms coming in today, so...
All right, cool.
From good old Jeff Bezos, our Lord and Savior. Okay.
Totally.
Thanks. Arjuna,
cool.
Right?
Cool, thank you. Hare Krishna.
God bless you. See you.